The bullet struck Petty Officer Reinhold in the shoulder and spun him into the dirt. Chief Petty Officer Keone Palakiko watched through her scope as blood bloomed across his uniform, as his teammates dragged him behind a crumbling wall while rounds chewed the mud brick inches from their heads. She had the shooter in her crosshairs. Set her mass. Easy shot. Her finger rested on the trigger with the patience of a woman who had taken this shot 100 times before. Do not engage, the voice in her earpiece commanded. Palakiko, that is a direct order. Do not fire. Keone watched the enemy sniper shift positions, settling into a new angle that would give him a clean line on 3 more Americans. She watched and did not fire. Beside her in the hide, Petty Officer Second Class Juno Weathers pressed her eye to the spotting scope and whispered something that might have been a prayer or might have been a curse. 12 Navy SEALs were pinned in the village below, caught in an ambush that had sprung the moment they entered the narrow streets of Darya Kale. Keone had counted 17 enemy fighters so far. 17 targets she could eliminate from her position on the ridge. 17 shots between those SEALs and survival. And she had been ordered to let them die. Kestrel, this is Copperhead Actual, Commander Hale's voice continued, cold and clinical despite the static. There is a high-value intelligence asset in that village. Any engagement risks compromising 2 decades of network development. You will hold position and observe only. Confirm. Keone's jaw tightened. She keyed her radio. Copperhead, Viper Element has 3 wounded and is taking effective fire from multiple positions. Request authorization to provide sniper support. Negative, Kestrel. That asset is more valuable than you can comprehend. Hold position. Confirm you understand. Down in the kill zone, she watched Lieutenant Yusuf Okonkwo trying to rally his team. Good officer. Steady under fire. But steady did not matter when you were outgunned and pinned with no support coming. She could see him on the radio, calling for air support, for quick reaction force, for anything. She knew what answers he was getting because she was hearing them too. All support assets are currently unavailable, Hale had told him. Maintain position and await further instructions. Unavailable. Not deployed elsewhere. Not out of range. Unavailable. The word sat wrong in Keone's mind, like a stone in a boot. Before we continue with Kestrel's impossible choice, drop a comment and let us know what state you are watching from. Maybe you know a veteran who faced a moment when following orders meant watching good people die. Juno pulled back from her scope. Chief, Reinhold is down but moving. Looks like the round missed the artery. But they have got 2 more wounded now. I count Trejo and somebody I cannot identify from this angle. Trejo. The name hit Keone like a second round. Marcus Trejo. She had known him for 9 years, since basic underwater demolition training, when half their class had quit and the other half had wanted to. Marcus had shattered his ankle on a night evolution, and the instructors had told him to ring the bell. Go home, try again next year. Keone had carried him 3 miles through the surf zone instead. He had made it through. He had become one of the finest operators she had ever known. Now she watched him bleeding in the dirt of an Afghan village, while a man in an air-conditioned tactical operations center 12 kilometers away told her his life was less important than an intelligence network. Another burst of gunfire echoed across the valley. Keone tracked the source through her scope. Rooftop position, north side of the main road. Fighter with a P-cam machine gun, laying down suppressive fire that kept Viper Element pinned behind their inadequate cover. She could take him. 800 meters, minimal wind, clear line of sight. A shot she had made 1,000 times. Her fingers stayed off the trigger. Juno's voice cracked. Chief, they are not going to make it. If we do not do something, they are all going to die down there. Keone did not respond. She was watching the enemy sniper reposition again, this time moving toward a building that would give him an angle on Okonkwo himself. Take out the officer, and the rest fell apart. Basic tactics. The enemy knew what they were doing. This was not a chance ambush. They had known Viper Element was coming. The thought crystallized in her mind as she tracked the sniper's movement. Someone had told them. Someone had compromised the mission. And now 12 Americans were paying the price while Commander Hale protected his precious asset. Kestrel, Cooperative Actual. I am reading elevated heart rate on your biometrics. Remind yourself of your orders. Do not engage. She wanted to rip the sensor off her wrist and hurl it into the valley. Instead, she breathed, slow and steady, the way her father had taught her when she was 8 years old and learning to hunt in the mountains of Oahu. Patience, he had said. The shot is just the end. The aim is everything that comes before. But her father had never aimed at a target he was forbidden to hit while Americans died in his crosshairs. Another scream echoed up from the village. She did not know whose voice it was, but she knew what it meant. Another seal down. 11 left, maybe fewer. Juno was crying now, silently, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face. She did not look away from her scope. Good operator. Disciplined. But discipline only carried you so far when you were watching men die for no reason you could understand. Keone made a decision. Not the decision, not yet, but a small one. A first step. She keyed her radio to Viper Element's frequency. Viper 1, this is Kestrel. I have eyes on your position. Enemy sniper is relocating to the white building, 2nd floor, northeast corner. You will have a shot on your command element in approximately 45 seconds. Okonkwo's voice came back, tight with pain and hope. Kestrel, can you engage? Negative, Viper 1. I am under orders to observe only. A pause. Then, quieter. Understood, Kestrel. Thank for the heads up. She watched him relay the information to his team, watched them shift their meager cover to account for the new threat. It would buy them minutes, maybe only seconds, but it was something. And then the enemy sniper reached his position, settled his rifle, and put a round through the chest of Chief Petty Officer Marcus Trejo. Keone watched her friend fall, watched his body crumple against the wall he had been using for cover, watched the other SEALs try to drag him to safety while rounds sparked off the stones around them. Juno made a sound that was not quite human, and in Keone's mind, something fundamental shifted. She had followed orders once before, 2 years ago, in a place called Black Tide. She had held position while 3 of her teammates died because a man behind a desk told her the mission mattered more than their lives. She had promised herself at their graves that she would never make that choice again. 17 targets, 12 Americans, one impossible decision. And somewhere in the village below, Marcus Trejo was bleeding out while she watched through her scope and did nothing. 2 years before this ridge, before the scope, before these impossible orders, Keone Palakiko had made the same choice a different way. Operation Black Tide. The Philippine Sea. A hostage rescue that went wrong from the first moment boots hit the deck of the cargo freighter. Her team had been pinned on the starboard side, while 3 of her teammates pushed toward the bridge. She had them in her scope, covering their advance when the order came through. All units pulled back immediately. Airstrike inbound. 60 seconds. She had watched her teammates through the crosshairs, watched them fighting toward the hostages who were so close to rescue. She had keyed her radio and begged for more time. Just 2 more minutes. They were almost there. Negative, Kestrel. Pull back now. That is a direct order. She had followed that order. She had pulled back to the extraction point while Petty Officers Williamson, Cortez, and Young continued their push, not knowing the airstrike was coming, their radios jammed by enemy countermeasures. She had watched the missile turn the bridge into a fireball. She had watched 3 friends die because she followed orders and did not find a way to warn them. The hostages died too. All of them. The intelligence that demanded the airstrike had been wrong. There were no weapons on that bridge. Just scared civilians and 3 SEALs trying to save them. Keone had stood at 3 funerals and made 3 promises. Never again. Never again. Never again. Now Marcus Trejo was bleeding in the dirt of Daria Kale, and the voice in her ear was telling her to watch and do nothing. Kestrel, cooperaad actual. Report status. She keyed her radio, her voice flat. Viper Element now has 4 casualties. Enemy maintaining effective fire from multiple positions. Requesting authorization to engage. Negative, Kestrel. Asset priority remains absolute. Continue observation. Juno wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing dust and tears into mud. Chief, how can they expect us to just watch? Because they are not watching, Keone said. They're looking at maps and asset networks and strategic value assessments. They're not seeing Marcus Trejo with a hole in his chest. In the village below, the SEAL medic was working frantically over Trejo's body. Still alive then. Still fighting. But for how long? Keone could not guess. She had seen wounds like that before. Sometimes men survived them. Sometimes they bled out in minutes. The variable was always time. Time and intervention, neither of which Viper element had. Lieutenant Okonkwo's voice cut through the radio chatter. Any station, this is Viper 1. We have 4 urgent surgical. Say again, 4 urgent surgical. Request immediate case vac. Our position is untenable. The response came from the Tactical Operations Center, calm and clinical. Viper 1, case vac assets are currently unavailable. Maintain position. Okonkwo's response was not calm. Copperhead, we are dying out here. I have 4 men who will not survive another hour without extraction. Where's our support? A pause. Then Commander Hale's voice, colder than the mountain wind. Lieutenant, your mission parameters have not changed. Maintain position and await further orders. Keone listened to the exchange and felt something harden in her chest. Unavailable. The word kept circling in her mind. Every support asset, every rescue option, every possible intervention, all unavailable. As if the entire military machine had simply stopped working the moment Viper element walked into an ambush. Or as if someone had made sure it would not work. She pushed the thought aside. Conspiracy thinking would not save Marcus. Would not save any of them. But the suspicion lingered like smoke. Juno suddenly tensed beside her. Chief, I have movement. Rooftop south, near the mosque. Looks like they're setting up another machine gun position. Keone shifted her scope. She found the target immediately. 2 fighters hauling a PKM onto a rooftop that would give them a devastating angle on Viper Element's position. If they got that gun set up, the SEALs would have nowhere to hide. She could stop them. 1 shot for the gunner. 1 for his assistant. 2 seconds of work. 800 meters, no wind, clear sky. A shot any competent sniper could make. Copperhead actual, this is Kestrel. Enemy establishing new machine gun position with direct line of fire on Viper element. Request immediate authorization to engage. Hale's response was instant. Negative, Kestrel. I say again, negative. Your orders have not changed. The fighters finished setting up their weapon. One of them racked the charging handle and sighted down toward the SEALs. Keone heard Okonkwo's voice, sharp with warning. All Viper elements, new threat south. Get to hard cover now. But there was no hard cover. The walls they were hiding behind had already been chewed to rubble by hours of sustained fire. When the PKM opened up, the rounds would punch through what remained like paper. The first burst came 3 seconds later. Keone watched the heavy rounds tear into the SEAL position, sending chips of stone and clouds of dust into the air. She watched men scramble and crawl, trying to find any angle that would shield them from the onslaught. One of them did not move fast enough. Petty Officer First Class Danny Reinhold, already wounded in the shoulder, took a round through the thigh. Even at this distance, Keone could see the arterial spray. Bright red, pulsing, fatal without immediate intervention. The medic abandoned Trejo and scrambled toward Reinhold, tourniquet in hand, already knowing he was choosing which man might live and which would certainly die. Juno's voice was barely a whisper. Oh God, Chief, his femoral. He's got minutes. Keone knew. She had seen femoral bleeds before, had watched men go pale, and still in less time than it took to call for help. Danny Reinhold had maybe 15 minutes before his heart pumped itself empty. Maybe less. 15 minutes. 17 shots. One impossible choice. She keyed her radio 1 final time. Copperhead actual, this is Kestrel. Viper element now has 5 casualties, including 1 critical arterial bleed. Without immediate intervention, all 12 operators will be killed. I am requesting, for the final time, authorization to engage enemy positions. Commander Hale's voice came back without hesitation. Kestrel, I understand your assessment. My orders remain unchanged. Do not engage. If you fire a single round without authorization, You will face general court-martial for insubordination in a combat zone. Do you understand? Keone closed her eyes. She saw Williamson and Cortez and Young burning on a bridge in the Philippine Sea. She saw Marcus Trejo bleeding against a mud brick wall. She saw Danny Reinhold with 15 minutes left to live. She opened her eyes and looked at Juno. Her spotter was staring at her with an expression caught between terror and desperate hope. I understand, Keone said into the radio. Then she switched off her connection to the Tactical Operations Center. Juno's breath caught. Chief, what are you doing? Keone chambered around. The sound was small and certain, like a period at the end of a sentence. I am violating orders, she said. And then she put her eye to the scope. Juno did not move for 3 long seconds. Her hand hovered over her spotting scope, frozen between duty and something deeper. Keone could see the war playing out behind her eyes. The training that screamed about chain of command. The conscience that screamed louder about 12 men dying in the valley below. Chief, Juno finally said, her voice cracking. If we do this, they will court-martial both of us. They will take everything. Keone did not look away from her scope. They will take our careers. Down there, they're taking lives. I know which math I can live with. Another burst from the PKM raked across Viper Element's position. Keone heard Okonkwo shouting for his men to stay down, stay covered, stay alive. The medic was working on Reinhold with desperate speed, but even from this distance, she could see the blood pooling beneath him faster than any tourniquet could stop. 12 minutes now. Maybe less. Juno took a breath. Then she pressed her eye to the spotting scope, and her voice went steady and professional. Wind is 4 knots, left to right. Gusting to 7. Range to the PKM position is 820 meters. I have the gunner and his assistant. 2 targets. Keone felt something loosen in her chest. She was not alone in this. Whatever came next, whatever price they paid, Juno had chosen to pay it with her. 2 targets confirmed, Keone said. Taking the gunner first. She settled her breathing, found the space between heartbeats where her body went still and her mind went quiet. The gunner was laughing about something, gesturing to his assistant while he fed another belt into the weapon. He did not know that 1,100 meters away, a woman he would never see had just made the decision that would end his life. Keone squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The round crossed the valley in less than a second. The gunner's head snapped back, and he crumpled over his weapon, dead before his body understood what had happened. His assistant stared for one frozen moment, trying to process the sudden silence of the gun. That moment was all Keone needed. Second target, Juno called. Keone was already shifting, already breathing, already squeezing. The assistant fell beside his partner, and the PKM went silent. Down in the village, she heard confused shouts. The enemy did not know where the shots had come from. They did not know that the game had changed. 2 down, Keone said. 15 to go. She was already scanning for her next target when her radio crackled. Not the command frequency, she had switched off. The emergency channel that could not be disabled. Palakiko. Commander Hale's voice was ice and fury. I'm tracking your rifle signature. You have just ended your career. Stand down immediately, or I will have you arrested the moment you set foot on base. Keone did not respond. She found her third target, a fighter with an RPG moving toward a position that would give him a clear shot at the SEALs. She calculated wind and distance and the slight upward angle of the shot. She fired. The fighter dropped. Palakiko Hale shouted. I am giving you a direct order. Stand down now. Juno looked at her with wide eyes. Chief, he is going to send someone after us. He is 12 kilometers away and his QRF is unavailable, Keone said. She found target 4, a sniper repositioning on a rooftop. Remember? Everything is unavailable today. She fired. The sniper tumbled off the roof and landed in the street below. 4 down. 13 to go. The enemy was starting to panic now. They had come into this ambush expecting easy kills, expecting to slaughter Americans who had no support and no escape. They had not expected death to start raining from the mountains. Juno called out her next target. Fighter at the northeast corner, ground level. He is trying to flank Viper Element. Keone shifted. The shot was more difficult now, a narrow window between two buildings with only a sliver of the target visible. She waited. The fighter moved. She fired. 5. The radio exploded with Hale's fury. Palakiko, you are committing treason. You are throwing away everything for 12 men who are already dead. The asset in that village is worth more than all of you combined. Keone paused. Something in his words caught her attention. The certainty in his voice. The cold calculation. He was not angry that she was disobeying orders. He was angry that she was disrupting something. Some plan that required Viper Element to die. She filed the thought away and found her sixth target. Movement on the mosque roof, Juno said. 2 fighters setting up a mortar. Keone saw them. They were working fast, assembling the weapon with practiced hands. If they got that mortar operational, they could drop rounds directly into the SEAL position. No amount of cover would save them then. She fired twice. Both fighters fell. 7, she said. 10 to go. Below, Lieutenant Okonkwo had realized what was happening. She heard his voice on the open channel, confused but hopeful. All Viper elements, we have sniper support from somewhere. Unknown friendly is engaging enemy positions. Use this window to consolidate wounded and prepare to move. Unknown friendly. Keone allowed herself a grim smile. She wondered if Okonkwo would still call her friendly when he learned what her support was costing. Juno called the next target. Keone fired. 8, then 9. Then the enemy figured out where she was. Round began snapping past their position, kicking up dirt and stone from the ridge around them. Counter-sniper fire, searching for her muzzle flash, her silhouette, any sign of where death was coming from. Juno flattened against the ground. Chief, they have spotted us. Keone did not flinch. She tracked the source of the incoming fire, found the enemy sniper in a window 300 meters closer than the others. He was good. His rounds were walking toward her position with methodical precision. She fired before he could correct. 10, she said. 7 to go. But the damage was done. More fighters were turning their attention toward the ridge. More rounds were incoming. Their hide was compromised. We need to move, Juno said. Keone knew she was right. But moving meant losing her angle. Losing precious seconds while Reinhold bled out in the valley below. Losing the momentum that was the only thing keeping those SEALs alive. She made a decision. 30 seconds. I can get 2 more from here. She found target 11 and fired. A fighter who had been advancing toward the SEAL position crumpled and lay still. Target 12 was harder. He was behind partial cover, only his head and shoulder visible. The wind gusted and Keone waited, counting heartbeats, feeling the rhythm of the air. The gust passed. She fired. 12 down. 5 to go. And the counter-sniper fire was getting closer. Now, Juno shouted. We have to go now. Keone grabbed her rifle and rolled out of the hide. Rounds sparked off the stones where she had been lying a half-second before. She and Juno scrambled across the ridge, keeping low, using every fold in the terrain for cover. 200 meters east, they found a new position. Worse angle, longer range, but concealed from the counterfire that was still raking their original location. Keone settled into the new hide and put her eye to the scope. The situation below had changed while she moved. The SEALs were regrouping, using the chaos to pull their wounded toward better cover. Marcus Trejo was moving, which meant he was still alive. Reinhold was on a stretcher, pale and still, the medic running beside him with a 4-bag held high. 9 minutes, Juno said. Maybe less. Keone found target 13, an enemy fighter trying to cut off the SEAL retreat. The range was 1,400 meters now, at the outer edge of her effective distance. She exhaled. She squeezed. She watched the fighter fall. 13, she said. For more. And then Commander Hale's voice came through the emergency channel one more time. Palakiko, I hope those shots are worth spending the rest of your life in Leavenworth, because I'm personally going to make sure you never see daylight again. Keone let Hale's threat wash over her like wind across the ridge. Leavenworth. Prison. The end of everything she had built in 14 years of service. The words should have meant something. An hour ago, they would have. But an hour ago, Marcus Trejo had not been bleeding in the dirt. An hour ago, Danny Reinhold had not been 8 minutes from death. She found target 14 through her scope. A fighter crouched behind a low wall, reloading his rifle, preparing to re-engage the retreating SEALs. 1,400 meters. Wind picking up from the southwest. A difficult shot made harder by the new position. Juno read the conditions without being asked. Wind steady at 6 knots now, gusting to 9. Just 2.5 minutes right. Keone made the adjustment. She waited for the gust to pass. She fired. The fighter slumped against the wall and did not move. 14, Keone said. 3 remaining. Below, the SEALs were making progress. Lieutenant Okonkwo had organized his men into a fighting withdrawal, using every scrap of cover the village offered. The wounded were in the center of the formation, protected by those still able to fight. It was textbook movement under fire, executed by men who had trained for exactly this kind of nightmare. But 3 enemy fighters still blocked their path to the extraction point. 3 men with rifles and the high ground and no intention of letting the Americans escape. Juno found the first one. Target 15, rooftop west of the main road. He's got a clear line on their exit route. Keone shifted her scope. The range was longer now, 1,500 meters at least. The target was partially concealed behind a low parapet, only his head and shoulders visible. The wind was gusting unpredictably, swirling between the buildings in patterns she could not fully read. She calculated, adjusted, waited for the moment between gusts. She fired. The round went wide. Stone chips exploded from the parapet 6 inches from the fighter's head. He ducked behind cover, untouched. "Miss," Juno said, her voice tight. Keone chambered another round. The fighter would be moving now, repositioning, trying to find a new angle that would protect him from the unseen sniper in the mountains. She had seconds to reacquire before he disappeared entirely. She found him. He was scrambling across the rooftop, bent low, heading for a stairwell that would take him out of her line of sight. She led his movement, calculating his speed, the angle, the wind that was still gusting across the valley. She fired. The round caught him in the center of his back. He pitched forward and lay still. 15, Keone said. 2 more. 7 minutes for Reinhold. Maybe less. The remaining fighters had gone aground now, hiding in the maze of buildings, waiting for a clear shot at the retreating SEALs. Keone scanned the village methodically, searching for any sign of movement. The wind was getting worse. The afternoon thermals rising from the valley floor and turning every shot into a gamble. Juno spotted him first. Target 16, ground level, inside the building with the blue door. I can see him through the window. He is setting up a firing position. Keone found the window. The fighter was inside, deep in the shadows, barely visible through the dusty glass. The shot would require punching through the window and finding a target she could barely see in conditions that were deteriorating by the minute. 1,600 meters, Juno said. Wind is all over the place down there. The buildings are creating eddies I cannot predict. Keone studied the shot, studied the window, studied the barely visible silhouette of a man who was about to kill Americans if she did not kill him first. She remembered her father's voice. Patience. The shot is just the end. The aim is everything that comes before. She breathed. She waited. The wind dropped for one brief moment, the air going still in that strange way it sometimes did before a gust. She fired. The window shattered. The silhouette jerked and fell. 16, Keone said. One more target, one more shot, and somewhere in that village, a single fighter who could still end everything. Juno was scanning frantically. I do not see him. Chief, I do not have eyes on the last target. Keone searched the streets, the rooftops, the windows and doorways. The SEALs were almost to the extraction point now, a clearing on the eastern edge of the village where the helicopter could land. Almost safe, almost home. But one fighter was enough to change that. One burst of rifle fire into the clustered wounded. One grenade tossed into the formation. One mistake was all it would take. Where are you? Keone murmured. And then she saw him. He was not hiding. He was not setting up a firing position. He was walking calmly down the center of the main road, rifle slung across his back, one hand raised in the air. He was heading toward the seals, and there was a child walking beside him. A girl, no more than 8 or 9 years old. The fighter had his free hand on her shoulder, keeping her close, using her small body as a shield against the death that had been raining from the mountains. Juno made a sound of pure anguish. Chief, he has got a kid. Keone saw. Her crosshairs were centered on the fighter's chest, but the girl was right there, pressed against his side, her face blank with terror. One slight movement, one flinch, one gust of wind pushing the round 2 inches off course. She could not take the shot, not with the child that close, not with any margin of error at all. The fighter knew it too. She could see the smile on his face, the arrogant certainty that he had found the one counter to the sniper in the mountains. He walked toward the seals with the confidence of a man holding an invincible shield. 6 minutes, Juno said. Reinhold has maybe 6 minutes. The seals had seen the approaching fighter now. Okonkwo was shouting something, trying to wave the man off, trying to negotiate or threaten or find some way to resolve this without more bloodshed. But the fighter just kept walking, that smile still on his face, the child still pressed against his side. Chief, Juno said. What'll we do? Keone did not answer. She was calculating something. Not windage, not distance, something else entirely. The fighter was using the child as a shield against a frontal shot, but he was still walking, still moving forward, and behind him, the road continued between the buildings, with walls on either side. Walls made of old stone, stone that had been baking in the Afghan sun for centuries. Stone that was harder than concrete and smoother than glass. Stone that a bullet could ricochet off of if you knew the angle, if you understood the physics, if you were willing to take a shot that no sane sniper would ever attempt. Juno, Keone said quietly, I need you to calculate something for me. What? Keone told her. Juno stared at her like she had lost her mind. Chief, that is impossible. The variables alone would require calculations we do not have time for. The margin of error is measured in millimeters. If you miss, if the angle is wrong by even a fraction of a degree, you could hit the girl. Keone kept her eye pressed to the scope. She watched the fighter walking, watched the child stumbling beside him, watched her last target approaching the men she had spent 17 rounds trying to save. I know, she said, so I will not miss. She began to calculate the angle of the wall, the velocity of the round, the distance and the deflection and the impossible geometry of a shot that had never been attempted in the history of combat sniping. 5 minutes. One shot. One child's life hanging in the balance. And Keone Palakiko steadied her breathing and began to aim. The math was impossible. Keone knew it even as she ran the calculations in her head. A rifle round traveling at 2,800 feet per second would lose velocity on impact with the stone wall. The angle of deflection would depend on the exact composition of the stone, the precise point of impact, variables that could not be measured from 1,600 meters away. She was attempting to thread a needle blindfolded while the needle was moving and a child's life hung on every decimal point. Juno's voice was barely a whisper. Chief, I cannot give you windage for this. I do not even know how to calculate what you are asking. Then give me what you can, Keone said. Wind to the wall. I will figure out the rest. Juno swallowed hard. She pressed her eye to the spotting scope and forced her voice steady. Wind is 7 knots, left to right. Gusting to 10. The wall is approximately 6 meters behind the target. Stone construction, probably limestone based on the color. Limestone, harder than sandstone. Smoother surface. Better deflection angle, but less predictable fragmentation. Keone adjusted her calculations. The fighter was still walking, still smiling. The child beside him had started crying, silent tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face. She did not understand what was happening. She only knew that the man gripping her shoulder was bad, and the distant crack of rifle fire meant death was somewhere nearby. For minutes, Juno said. Reinhold has 4 minutes. Keone found her aiming point. Not the fighter, not even close to the fighter. A spot on the wall behind him, shoulder height, where the angle of the stone met her line of fire at precisely the degree she needed. If she was right, the round would strike the wall, deflect downward and left, and catch the fighter in the back of the neck. Fatal. Instant. Clean. If she was wrong, The round would fragment unpredictably. Shrapnel could go anywhere, including into the small body of a terrified girl. She could not take this shot. Every instinct, every piece of training, every rule of engagement she had ever learned screamed that this was beyond acceptable risk. A sniper did not gamble with innocent lives. A sniper waited for the clean shot or did not shoot at all. But there was no clean shot. There was no more time to wait. And 12 Americans were going to die if she did not pull this trigger. Keone thought of Danny Reinhold, pale and still on that stretcher, his life measured in minutes. She thought of Marcus Trejo, still fighting despite the hole in his chest. She thought of Williamson and Cortez and Young, burning on a bridge because she had followed orders instead of following her conscience. She thought of her father, patient and calm, teaching her to shoot in the mountains of Oahu. The shot is just the end. The aim is everything that comes before. Everything that comes before. She had spent 14 years becoming the best sniper in the Navy. She had taken shots that other operators said were impossible. She had trained her body and her mind and her instincts until the rifle was an extension of her will. This was everything that came before. Every hour on the range. Every calculation in the wind. Every breath between heartbeats. She pressed her eye to the scope. She found her aiming point on the wall. She made one final adjustment for wind and distance and the deflection angle that existed only in her calculations. She exhaled. She squeezed the trigger. The round crossed the valley in less than a second. It struck the limestone wall exactly where she had aimed, 6 meters behind the walking fighter. Stone dust exploded from the impact point, and the bullet deflected. It came off the wall at a sharp downward angle, tumbling slightly from the impact but still carrying lethal velocity. It traveled to 6 meters in a fraction of a heartbeat. It struck the fighter in the back of the neck, just below the base of his skull. He dropped instantly. His hand slipped from the child's shoulder. His rifle clattered to the ground, unfired. He was dead before his knees hit the dirt. The girl stood frozen for one eternal moment, staring at the body beside her. Then she ran. She ran toward the SEALs, toward the Americans who represented safety in a world that had just tried to use her as a human shield. Lieutenant Okonkwo caught her, scooped her up in his arms, and passed her to one of his men, and kept moving because stopping meant dying, and they were not done yet. 17, Keone said. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears, distant, like it belonged to someone else. Juno was staring at her. Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling. Chief, you did it. You actually did it. Keone did not smile. She was already scanning the village, searching for threats she might have missed, targets that might have escaped her count. But the streets were empty now. The surviving fighters had melted away into the mountains, unwilling to face the invisible death that had claimed 17 of their brothers. The path to extraction was clear. She watched the SEALs move, watched them carry their wounded toward the clearing where salvation waited. Watched Danny Reinhold's stretcher bounce over the rough ground while the medic ran beside him, still fighting to keep him alive. 3 minutes, Juno said. Maybe less. Come on, Keone whispered. Come on, come on, come on. The helicopter appeared over the eastern ridge, rotors thundering, door gunners scanning for threats. It descended toward the clearing in a combat landing, fast and low, kicking up clouds of dust that swallowed the SEALs as they ran toward it. Keone lost visual. For 30 agonizing seconds, she could see nothing but dust and rotor wash and the dark shape of the helicopter on the ground. Then it lifted, rising fast, banking hard, climbing towards safety with 12 Americans inside. Juno let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. They made it. Chief, they made it. Keone watched the helicopter grow smaller against the Afghan sky. She watched it until it was a speck on the horizon, until it disappeared entirely, until she was certain that it was beyond the range of any threat this valley could produce. Then she lowered her rifle. She rolled on her back and stared up at the empty blue sky. 17 shots, 12 lives, 1 career destroyed. And somewhere in that helicopter, Danny Reinhold was either fighting his way back from the edge of death or slipping beyond the reach of any help at all. She would not know which until she faced the consequences of what she had done. Juno appeared in her field of vision, looking down at her with an expression of exhausted wonder. "Chief, that was the most incredible thing I have ever seen. The ricochet shot alone would be impossible for anyone else." Keone closed her eyes. It was not impossible. It was just math. Math and 14 years of training and the absolute refusal to let 12 more names be added to the list of people she had failed. She lay there for a long moment, letting the adrenaline drain from her body, letting the reality of what came next settle into her bones. Commander Hale would be waiting. The charges would be filed. Her career, her freedom, her entire life would be weighed against 17 bullets and the men those bullets had saved. She did not regret it. She knew she should feel something, some flicker of doubt or fear or second-guessing. But all she felt was tired. Tired and certain that she had finally, after 2 years of carrying 3 ghosts, made the right choice. "We should move," she said finally. "It is a long walk back to base, and I have an arrest to keep." The walk back to forward operating base Copperhead took 3 hours. 3 hours of silent hiking through mountain terrain, carrying 50 pounds of gear, replaying every shot in her mind. Juno walked beside her without speaking, both of them lost in the weight of what they had done and what was coming. The base appeared as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks. Guard towers, concrete barriers, the controlled chaos of a military installation in a combat zone. Keone had walked through those gates 100 times before. This time felt different. This time felt like walking into a cage. Master Chief Cormac Rourke was waiting at the gate. Keone had known Rourke for 6 years. He was old school, career Navy, the kind of operator who had earned his trident when the teams were still an all-male brotherhood. He had never said anything directly about women in special operations, but she had felt his disapproval in every interaction. The slight pause before acknowledging her. The way his eyes would slide past her in briefings. The 1,000 small dismissals that added up to a clear message. She expected him to be smiling now. Expected satisfaction in his eyes at watching her career end in disgrace. Expected him to personally escort her to whatever holding cell Commander Hale had prepared. Instead, Rourke's face was unreadable. He stood at the gate with his arms crossed, watching her approach, and something in his posture was different than she had ever seen before. "Chief Petty Officer Palakiko," he said. His voice was formal. "Controlled. Petty Officer Weathers. You are both to report to the Tactical Operations Center immediately." Keone nodded. She had expected as much. She handed her rifle to the armorer at the gate and followed Rourke into the base. The Tactical Operations Center was a prefabricated building at the heart of the FOB, filled with screens and communications equipment and the quiet hum of machines processing information. Commander Hale was there, standing in front of a bank of monitors, his back rigid with barely contained fury. But he was not alone. A woman Keone did not recognize stood beside the main console, wearing the eagles of a Navy captain. Her uniform was immaculate despite the dust of the FOB, and her eyes were fixed on a screen showing drone footage that Keone recognized immediately. It was the village, Daria Kale. The footage was replaying her shots, one by one, tracking the fall of each target with clinical precision. "Chief Petty Officer Palakiko," Commander Hale said. His voice was ice. "You are under arrest for insubordination, failure to obey a direct order, and reckless endangerment. You will surrender yourself to military police and await court-martial." Keone stood at attention. She did not speak. There was nothing to say that would change what was coming. But the captain spoke instead. "Belay that order, Commander." Hale's head snapped toward her. "Captain Vasquez, this is my command. This operator violated direct orders and compromised a critical intelligence asset. She will face the consequences." Captain Vasquez did not look away from the screen. The footage was showing the 17th shot now, the impossible ricochet, the fighter dropping while the child ran free. She watched it with the expression of someone seeing something they had never expected to see. "Commander Hale," she said quietly, "I have been monitoring the situation from Bagram for the past 4 hours. I have reviewed all communications all drone footage, and all operational data from today's events. She turned to face him. Her eyes were cold, including the communications you neglected to mention in your initial report. Something flickered across Hale's face, the first crack in his composure. I do not know what you're referring to. Captain Vasquez picked up a tablet from the console and read aloud. 0614 hours. Commander Hale received confirmation that the intelligence asset had departed the village 20 minutes prior to the ambush. The asset was never in danger. At no point during the engagement was the asset present in the area of operations. The words hung in the air like smoke. Keone felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She had suspected something was wrong. The way Hale had been so certain. The way every support asset had been unavailable. But she had not known. She had not imagined that it could be this simple, this monstrous. He knew, Juno whispered beside her. He knew the whole time. Commander Hale's face had gone pale. Captain, that intelligence was classified. The asset's movements were need to know. 12 SEALs were need to know, Captain Vasquez said. Her voice was rising now, the first heat breaking through her professional calm. 12 operators were dying in that village while you ordered their only support to stand down. And you did it to protect an asset who was not even there. The asset network Hale started was already compromised. Vasquez cut him off. We received confirmation from Langley 2 hours ago. The network was burned 3 weeks ago. The asset was being extracted, not protected. There was nothing in that village worth a single American life, let alone 12. Keone watched Hale's face crumble. The righteous authority that had filled his voice on the radio was gone. What remained was smaller, uglier, a man caught in a lie that had almost cost 12 lives. Rourke spoke for the first time since entering the building. His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that filled the room. I watched the drone feed, he said. Every shot, every kill. I watched Chief Palakiko take 17 targets from 1,600 meters with counter-sniper fire, incoming, and wind conditions that would have made most operators pack up and go home. He turned to look at Keone. His eyes met hers directly, and she saw something she had never seen there before. Respect. I have been in the teams for 28 years, Rourke continued. I have never seen shooting like that. I have never seen anyone make the choices she made under those conditions. He paused, and I have never been more wrong about an operator in my life. The admission hung in the silence. Keone did not know how to respond. She had spent years expecting nothing from Rourke but dismissal. This felt like watching a mountain move. Captain Vasquez stepped forward. Chief Petty Officer Palakiko, you violated a direct order from your commanding officer. That is a fact that cannot be ignored. Keone straightened. Yes, ma'am. However, Vasquez continued, given the circumstances of that order, including the concealment of critical intelligence and the apparent willingness to sacrifice 12 operators to protect a non-existent asset, your actions will be reviewed by a special board rather than a standard court-martial. She glanced at Commander Hale, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the last 5 minutes. As will Commander Hale's. 2 military police officers appeared at the door. They walked past Keone without stopping and positioned themselves on either side of Commander Hale. Commander Brixton Hale, Captain Vasquez said, you are relieved of command pending investigation into dereliction of duty and providing false intelligence to combat operators. You will surrender yourself to military police custody immediately. Hale's mouth opened, closed. He looked at Keone with something that might have been hatred or might have been fear. Then the MPs took his arms and led him out of the building. The door closed behind him. Captain Vasquez turned back to Keone. The SEALs you saved are at the field hospital. Petty Officer Reinhold is in surgery. The doctors say he has a chance. She paused. They also say that if extraction had been delayed by even 2 more minutes, he would have died. Keone nodded. She did not trust herself to speak. You should go see them, Vasquez said. Her voice softened just slightly. They have been asking for the sniper who saved their lives. The field hospital was a collection of tents and prefab structures on the north side of the base, smelling of antiseptic and blood and the particular exhaustion that came from fighting death one body at a time. Keone walked through the entrance with Juno beside her, both of them still covered in the dust and sweat of the mountain. A Navy corpsman met them inside. Chief Palakiko, the SEALs from Viper Element are in Ward 3. Most of them are stable. He hesitated. Chief Trejo is asking for you specifically. Marcus. Keone felt something loosen in her chest at the confirmation that he was alive. Take me to him. Ward 3 was a long tent divided by canvas partitions, each section holding a cot and whatever medical equipment the patient required. The SEALs from Viper Element filled nearly half the ward. Bandaged, bruised, alive. They looked up as she entered. 11 faces, some she recognized, some she did not. Lieutenant Okonkwo was sitting on the edge of his cot, his left arm in a sling, dark eyes tracking her as she walked down the center aisle. No one spoke. The silence stretched until it became weight. Then Marcus Trejo's voice came from the far end of the ward, weak but unmistakable. Took you long enough, Kestrel. Keone walked to his cot. Marcus was pale, for lines running into both arms, bandages wrapped thick around his chest. The wound had been bad. The fact that he was conscious and talking was a minor miracle. She stood beside him, looking down at the man she had carried through the surf 9 years ago. The man who had stood up for her when half the team said women did not belong. The man she had watched fall through her scope and thought she might never speak to again. You look terrible, she said. Marcus laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at his wounds. You should see the other guy. He paused. Oh wait, you did see him. Right before you put a bullet through his chest from 1,400 meters. 1,300, Keone corrected. The chest shot was closer. Marcus shook his head slowly. 17 confirmed kills. Counter-sniper fire incoming. Wind gusting to 10 knots. And a ricochet shot that I still do not believe actually happened, even though I watched the target drop. It was not that impressive, Keone said. Every operator in this ward would disagree. She became aware of the others watching. 11 SEALs, the men she had saved, all of them looking at her with expressions she was not sure how to read. Respect, gratitude, something that might have been awe. Lieutenant Okonkwo rose from his cot and walked toward her. He moved carefully, favoring his unwounded side, but there was purpose in every step. Chief Petty Officer Palakiko, he said. He stopped in front of her and straightened to attention, despite his injuries. On behalf of Viper Element, I want to thank you for what you did today. You disobeyed a direct order to save our lives. Every man in this room owes you a debt we can never repay. Keone shook her head. You do not owe me anything, Lieutenant. I did what anyone would have done. No, Marcus said from his cot. You did what no one else could have done. The shot difficulty alone would have stopped most snipers. But you also had to make the choice. You had to decide that 12 lives were worth your career, your freedom, everything you have built. He paused. That is not nothing, Keone. That is everything. She did not know how to respond. She had spent so many years being dismissed, overlooked, forced to prove herself again and again. She had grown used to the weight of low expectations. This felt different. This felt like something she had not earned, even though she knew she had. A commotion at the ward entrance drew her attention. 2 corpsmen were wheeling a gurney through the door, and on it lay Danny Reinhold, pale and still but breathing. The surgeon walked beside the gurney, a tired woman with blood on her scrubs and relief in her eyes. She saw Keone and stopped. You are the sniper, she said. It was not a question. Yes, ma'am. The surgeon looked at Reinhold, then back at Keone. Femoral artery laceration. He lost almost 40% of his blood volume before we got him on the table. By every medical standard, he should be dead. But he is not, Keone said. No, he is not. The surgeon shook her head slowly. The tourniquet his medic applied bought him time. The rapid extraction bought him more. If that helicopter had arrived even 2 minutes later, we would be having a very different conversation. She stepped closer to Keone, lowering her voice. I've been doing battlefield surgery for 11 years. I've seen a lot of soldiers saved by skill and luck and the grace of God. But I have never seen someone save 12 lives with 17 bullets. She paused. Whatever they do to you for disobeying orders, I hope they remember that Danny Reinhold is going to walk again because of what you did. The surgeon moved on, directing the corpsman to settle Reinhold in a bed at the end of the ward. Keone watched them work, watched the monitors come online, watched the steady beep of a heart that was still beating because she had refused to let it stop. Juno appeared beside her. "You okay, Chief?" Keone considered the question. She was exhausted. She was facing an uncertain future. She had made choices today that would define the rest of her career, one way or another. But Danny Reinhold was alive. Marcus Trejo was alive. 11 other SEALs were alive because she had decided that their lives mattered more than her orders. "Yeah," she said. "I am okay." Marcus called from his cot. "Hey, Kestrel, come here. There is something I need to tell you." She walked back to his bedside. Marcus reached out with the arm that was not connected to N4 and gripped her hand. His skin was cold, his grip weak, but his eyes were clear. 2 years ago, he said quietly, "After Black Tide, I saw what it did to you." Carrying those 3 names. Blaming yourself for following orders. He squeezed her hand. "I always wondered what you would do if you ever faced that choice again." "Now you know," Keone said. "Now I know." Marcus smiled, a pale ghost of his usual grin. "You chose us, Keone. You chose 12 operators you had never even met, knowing what it would cost you." He paused. "I have never been prouder to call someone my sister." The word hit her harder than she expected. Sister. Not teammate. Not colleague. Not fellow operator. Sister. She squeezed his hand back. "Get some rest, Marcus. You look like you have been shot." "That is because I have been shot," he said. "But I will be fine, because someone up on that ridge decided I was worth saving." Keone stayed with him until his eyes closed and his breathing steadied into sleep. Then she stepped back and looked around the ward at the men she had saved. Some were sleeping. Some were watching her with quiet gratitude. All of them were alive. Whatever came next, whatever price she had to pay, this was worth it. She walked out of the field hospital and into the Afghan night, where the stars were bright and cold and the future was waiting to be decided. 3 days passed before the summons came. Keone spent those days in a strange limbo, confined to base but not arrested, watched but not guarded. She ate in a mess hall with the other operators. She slept in her assigned quarters. She visited the field hospital twice a day to check on the SEALs, watching Danny Reinhold's color slowly return and Marcus Trejo's strength gradually rebuild. No one told her what was happening. No one told her what would happen next. She existed in the space between hero and criminal, waiting for someone to decide which one she was. On the morning of the 4th day, Master Chief Rourke appeared at her quarters. "Get your dress uniform ready," he said. "You are flying to Bagram this afternoon. The review board convenes tomorrow." Keone nodded. She had expected this. A special board, Captain Vasquez had said. Not a court-martial, but something close. A group of senior officers would examine her actions, weigh the circumstances, and determine whether she had committed an act of heroism or an act of treason. The line between the two was thinner than most people realized. Rourke did not leave immediately. He stood in her doorway, his weathered face carrying an expression she had never seen directed at her before. "I submitted a statement to the board," he said, describing what I witnessed on the drone feed, describing my professional assessment of your actions. Keone waited. "I also submitted a formal apology," Rourke continued, "for 6 years of assumptions I had no right to make." His jaw tightened. "I told them that I opposed women in special operations because I believed they could not perform at the level required. I told them that you proved me wrong in every way that matters." The words hung between them. Keone did not know how to respond. This was the man who had made her feel unwelcome in her own community for half a decade. This was the man whose silent disapproval had been a weight she carried into every mission, every briefing, every moment of her career. And now he was standing in her doorway, admitting he had been wrong. "Thank you, Master Chief," she said finally. "That means more than you know." Rourke nodded once, sharply. "Do not thank me yet. The board could still go either way. But whatever they decide, I wanted you to know where I stand." He paused. "For what it is worth, I hope they see what I saw." He turned and walked away before she could respond. The flight to Bagram took 2 hours. Keone sat in the back of a C-130, alone with her thoughts and the drone of the engines. Juno had wanted to come, but her presence at the board would not change anything. This was something Keone had to face alone. The review board was scheduled for the following morning, but that evening, she received an unexpected visitor. Captain Vasquez appeared at her temporary quarters with a tablet in her hand and a grim expression on her face. "Chief Palaquico, may I come in?" Keone stepped aside. The captain entered and stood in the center of the small room, looking around at the bare walls and empty desk. "I wanted to give you an update before tomorrow," Vasquez said. "The investigation into Commander Hale has expanded significantly." Keone waited. Vasquez pulled up something on her tablet. "We have been reviewing his communications for the past 6 months. What we have found is disturbing." She paused. Hale was not just protecting an intelligence asset that day. He was covering up a failure. What kind of failure? The asset, a man named Farhan Nazari, was a critical source for operations throughout the region. 3 weeks before the ambush, Hale received intelligence that Nazari had been compromised. The network was burned. Every contact, every safe house, every operation connected to that asset was at risk. Keone felt a cold weight settling in her stomach. She could see where this was going. Hale did not report the compromise. Vasquez continued. He buried it, classified the intelligence, and continued operating as if everything was fine. When the ambush happened, when Viper Element walked into a trap that was clearly set by someone with inside knowledge, Hale knew exactly what had gone wrong. "He sacrificed 12 SEALs to cover his own mistake," Keone said. "That is what we believe, yes." Vasquez's voice was carefully neutral, but Keone could hear the fury underneath. "He ordered you to stand down, not to protect an asset, but to protect himself. If Viper Element had been wiped out, there would have been no witnesses to contradict his version of events. He could have blamed the ambush on bad luck instead of burned intelligence. And if I had followed orders," Keone said slowly, 12 men would be dead and Hale would still be running operations." Vasquez nodded. "Instead, you disobeyed. You saved 12 witnesses who can testify to exactly how that ambush unfolded. And now Commander Brixton Hale is facing charges that go far beyond dereliction of duty." She put the tablet away and looked at Keone directly. "I'm not supposed to tell you how the board is leaning, but I think you deserve to know that the evidence we have uncovered changes the context of your actions significantly. You did not just save 12 lives. You exposed a cover-up that could have cost dozens more." Keone absorbed this. She had known something was wrong with Hale's orders. She had felt it in the certainty of his voice, the convenient unavailability of every support asset. But she had not imagined the full scope of his betrayal. "What happens to him now?" she asked. "Court-martial," Vasquez said. "Charges include dereliction of duty, providing false intelligence to combat operators, conspiracy to cover up intelligence failures, and reckless endangerment resulting in casualties." She paused. "If convicted, he will spend the rest of his career in Leavenworth. The same fate he had promised Keone. There was a certain justice in that, she supposed. But it did not feel like victory. It felt like waste. 12 men had almost died because one officer cared more about his career than their lives. "Get some rest," Captain Vasquez said. "Tomorrow will be long, but I think you can face it with a clear conscience." She left without waiting for a response. Keone sat on the edge of her cot and stared at the wall. Tomorrow, a board of senior officers would decide her fate. They would weigh her insubordination against the lives she had saved. They would consider the context of Hale's orders, the impossibility of the shots she had taken, the child she had risked everything to protect. And they would render a verdict that would define the rest of her life. She thought about Marcus, recovering in the field hospital. She thought about Danny Reinhold, alive against all odds. She thought about 11 other SEALs who would go home to their families because she had refused to watch them die. Whatever the board decided, those men were alive. That was something no verdict could take away. She lay back on her cot, closed her eyes, and waited for morning. The review board convened at 0800 in a windowless conference room at Bagram Air Base. 5 officers sat behind a long table, their faces professionally neutral, their uniforms heavy with ribbons and insignia that represented decades of combined service. Keone stood at attention before them, alone. The board president was a rear admiral named Chun, a compact man with silver hair and eyes that gave nothing away. He reviewed the documents in front of him for a long moment before speaking. Chief Petty Officer Keone Palakiko, you are here to answer for your actions on the 14th of this month in Nangarhar Province, Afghanistan. Specifically, you are accused of willful disobedience of a direct order from your commanding officer during combat operations. He looked up. How do you respond to this accusation? Keone kept her voice steady. Sir, I do not dispute that I disobeyed Commander Hale's orders. I was instructed to hold fire and observe only. I chose instead to engage 17 enemy combatants in order to save the lives of 12 Navy SEALs. Admiral Chin nodded slowly. You understand that disobedience of a direct order during combat operations is among the most serious charges a service member can face. Yes, sir. I understand. And you chose to disobey anyway. Keone met his eyes. Yes, sir. I did. The Admiral leaned back in his chair. Tell me why. This was the moment she had been preparing for. The moment where everything she had done would be weighed and measured and judged. Sir, she began, I was positioned on an overwatch ridge with a clear line of fire to the ambush site. I watched Viper Element take casualties. I watched them call for support that never came. I watched a tourniquet go on Danny Reinholdt's leg and knew he had minutes to live. She paused, steadying herself. Commander Hale ordered me to hold fire to protect an intelligence asset. I requested authorization to engage 4 times. Each time I was denied. She took a breath. When Petty Officer Reinholdt was hit with a femoral bleed, I made a decision. I decided that 12 American lives were worth more than my career, worth more than my freedom, worth more than whatever that asset represented. Admiral Chin's expression did not change. You took it upon yourself to override the judgment of your commanding officer. Yes, sir. You decided that you knew better than the officer responsible for the strategic picture. Keone hesitated. Then she spoke the truth she had carried since Black Tide. Sir, 2 years ago, I followed orders in a similar situation. I held position when I could have acted. 3 of my teammates died because I trusted that my commanding officer had information I did not. She paused. I spent 2 years learning that sometimes the person with the scope sees more clearly than the person with the strategy. I was not willing to watch 12 more Americans die on the faith that someone in an air-conditioned TOC knew something I did not. The room was silent. The 5 officers exchanged glances that Keone could not read. Admiral Chin spoke again. We have reviewed the evidence extensively. We have examined Commander Hale's communications, the drone footage of your engagement, and the testimony of multiple witnesses. He paused. We have also received statements from the operators of Viper Element. He picked up a document from the table. Lieutenant Yusuf Okonkwo writes, and I quote, Chief Petty Officer Palakiko's actions saved the lives of every man in my team. Her shooting was the most extraordinary display of marksmanship I have witnessed in 14 years of service. Without her intervention, we would all be dead. End quote. He set the document down and picked up another. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Trejo writes, I have known Chief Palakiko for 9 years. She is the finest operator I have ever served with. On the 14th, she made a choice that most people would not have the courage to make. She chose us over herself. I owe her my life, and I am proud to call her my sister. End quote. Keone felt her throat tighten. She had not known they were submitting statements. She had not known the words they would choose. Admiral Chin continued, We have received similar statements from every surviving member of Viper Element. Additionally, we have received a statement from Master Chief Cormac Rourke, who observed your engagement via drone feed. He read from another document. I have served in the SEAL teams for 28 years. I have seen operators perform under every conceivable condition. What Chief Palakiko accomplished on the 14th was beyond anything in my experience. 17 kills at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters, under counter-sniper fire, with wind conditions that would challenge any marksman alive. Her final shot, a calculated ricochet to neutralize a target using a child as a shield, was tactically and technically impossible by any standard I know. And she made it anyway. He paused. Master Chief Rourke concludes, I was wrong about Chief Palakiko. I was wrong about what women could accomplish in special operations. She has proven herself in a way that leaves no room for doubt. Whatever this board decides, she has my respect and my gratitude." The admiral set down the final document and folded his hands. "Chief Palakiko, the evidence before this board presents an unusual situation. You unquestionably violated a direct order. Under normal circumstances, that violation would result in severe consequences." Keone braced herself. However, Admiral Chun continued, "The circumstances were not normal. Your commanding officer was operating under false pretenses, concealing critical intelligence failures, and issuing orders designed to protect his career rather than American lives. The order you disobeyed was not a legitimate tactical decision. It was a cover-up." He leaned forward. "Furthermore, your actions in disobeying that order resulted in the preservation of 12 American lives, the exposure of a significant intelligence scandal, and the prevention of what would have been a catastrophic loss for the special operations community." Admiral Chun glanced at his fellow board members. Each of them nodded in turn. "This board finds that while Chief Petty Officer Palakiko did technically violate orders, her actions were justified by the extraordinary circumstances and the corrupt nature of those orders. No disciplinary action will be taken. Her record will reflect commendation rather than censure." Keone blinked. She had prepared herself for prison, for discharge, for the end of everything she had built. She had not prepared for this. Additionally, Admiral Chun said, "This board is recommending Chief Petty Officer Palakiko for the Silver Star for gallantry in action. Her extraordinary marksmanship and moral courage saved 12 lives and exposed a failure of leadership that could have cost many more." He stood. The other board members stood with him. "Chief Palakiko, this board is honored to have reviewed your case. You represent the finest traditions of the Navy and the special operations community." He paused. "You are dismissed with our thanks." Keone saluted. The admiral returned it. She walked out of the conference room on legs that did not feel entirely solid. The corridor outside was empty except for one figure leaning against the far wall. Juno straightened as Keone emerged. Her eyes were wide with desperate hope. "Well?" Keone stopped. She took a breath. She let herself smile. "Silver Star," she said, "and they're not taking my trident." Juno's face broke into a grin so wide it looked almost painful. She crossed the distance between them and wrapped Keone in a hug that lifted her off her feet. "You did it," Juno whispered. "You did it, Chief." Keone hugged her back. "No," she said. "We did it." The news traveled faster than Keone did. By the time she landed back at Forward Operating Base Copperhead, the entire base knew the outcome of her review board. She walked from the helicopter pad through a gauntlet of eyes, some curious, some respectful, some still uncertain how to feel about a woman who had defied orders and been rewarded for it. She did not care about any of them. She cared about the field hospital and the men waiting inside. The ward was different than she remembered. The SEALs of Viper Element had been moved to a recovery section, their beds arranged in a cluster that allowed them to see each other, talk to each other, heal together. Danny Reinhold was sitting up now, pale but alert, his wounded leg elevated on a stack of pillows. Marcus Trejo was standing by the window, moving gingerly but moving nonetheless. They all looked up when she entered. For a moment, no one spoke. Keone stood in the doorway, still wearing her dress uniform from the board, feeling the weight of 12 pairs of eyes. Then Marcus started clapping. One pair of hands became 2, then 5, then all of them. The SEALs of Viper Element, wounded and bandaged and held together with stitches and stubbornness, applauded the woman who had saved their lives. Lieutenant Okonkwo rose from his cot, his arms still in a sling, and walked toward her. He stopped at attention and rendered a salute so crisp it could have been on a parade ground. "Chief Petty Officer Palakiko," he said, "on behalf of Viper Element, welcome back." Keone returned the salute. She did not trust her voice. Marcus limped over to join them, grinning despite the obvious pain of movement. "So," he said, "Silver Star. Not bad for a day's work." "The shooting was the easy part," Keone said. "The board was terrifying." Laughter rippled through the ward. The tension broke, and suddenly she was surrounded, hands reaching to shake hers, voices offering thanks and congratulations. Names and faces she was only beginning to connect, all of them alive because of 17 bullets and one impossible choice. Danny Reinhold could not stand, but he waved her over to his bedside. Keone made her way through the crowd and stopped beside his cot. He looked better than she had feared. The color was returning to his face, and his eyes were clear and focused. The leg was heavily bandaged, elevated, surrounded by monitoring equipment, but it was still attached. Still his. "Chief Palakiko," he said. His voice was rough but steady. "I understand you're the reason I still have a pulse. The medic who put the tourniquet on deserves most of the credit," Keone said. "I just cleared the path." Danny, he shook his head. "I was awake for most of it, you know. Fading in and out, but awake. I heard the shots. Counted them, even when I could focus enough to count." He paused. 17. I kept thinking, who fires 17 times in a situation like that? Who has the skill and the nerve to keep shooting with everything falling apart? Keone did not answer. "Then I heard the helicopter," Danny continued. "Felt them loading me on the stretcher. And I thought, whoever that was, they just gave me my life back." He reached out and gripped her hand. "Thank you, Chief. Thank you for not following orders." She squeezed his hand. "Get better, Reinhold. That is all the thanks I need." A commotion at the ward entrance drew her attention. Captain Vasquez was walking through the door, followed by Master Chief Rourke and a man Keone did not recognize. He wore civilian clothes, expensive and out of place in a combat hospital, and his face carried the weathered look of someone who had spent decades in places he could never talk about. The seals parted as the group approached. Captain Vasquez stopped in front of Keone. "Chief Palakiko," she said. "This is Director Matheson from the Central Intelligence Agency. He asked to speak with you personally." The civilian stepped forward. "Chief Palakiko, I wanted to thank you in person for what you accomplished last week." Keone regarded him carefully. She was not inclined to feel warmth toward anyone from the agency that had created the asset Mess Hale had exploited. "Thank me for what, sir?" Matheson's expression was difficult to read. "The network that Commander Hale was supposedly protecting was my responsibility. I built it over 15 years. When it was compromised, I reported the failure through proper channels. I expected the information to be acted upon." He paused. "Instead, Commander Hale buried it, classified my report, continued operating as if nothing had changed, because admitting the compromise would have damaged his career." Keone waited. "When the ambush happened, I was in Langley, watching the same drone feed that Master Chief Rourke was watching. I saw 12 Americans dying because of a failure I had reported and a cover-up I knew nothing about." He paused. "And then I saw you start shooting." The ward was silent now. Every SEAL was listening. "I have been in intelligence for 31 years, Matheson continued. "I have seen operators do extraordinary things. But I have never seen anyone make the choice you made under the pressure you faced with the skill you demonstrated." He extended his hand. "You saved 12 lives that day, Chief. But you also exposed a rot that could have cost hundreds more. The agency owes you a debt." Keone shook his hand. "The agency can pay that debt by making sure this never happens again." Matheson nodded slowly. "We are working on that. Commander Hale's court-martial begins next month. The charges have expanded since your board. He will not see the outside of a cell for a very long time." "Good," Marcus said from across the room. "Let him rot." No one disagreed. Matheson released Keone's hand and stepped back. "I will leave you to your reunion. But I wanted you to know that what you did mattered beyond this room, beyond those 12 lives. You exposed something that needed to be exposed, and the community is better for it." He nodded to Captain Vasquez and walked out of the ward. Rourke remained behind. He approached Keone with the same uncertain expression he had worn since the day everything changed. "Chief," he said, "I spoke to Admiral Chun after the board. He told me your testimony was the most impressive he had seen in 30 years of service." He paused. "He also told me that you never mentioned me, never brought up the years of doubt, never used my prejudice to justify your actions." Keone met his eyes. "What happened between us was not relevant to what happened on that ridge." Rourke was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. You are a better operator than I ever gave you credit for, he said, and a better person than I deserved. He straightened. If there is ever anything you need, anything at all, you come to me. That is not an offer. That is a debt. He turned and walked out before she could respond. Marcus appeared at her elbow, watching Rourke go. Never thought I would see that, he said quietly. Cormac Rourke admitting he was wrong about anything. People change, Keone said. Marcus looked at her. Some people. The good ones. He paused. You did not change, though. You were always this. The rest of us just took too long to see it. Keone did not know how to respond. So she did what she always did when emotions threatened to overwhelm her. She changed the subject. When do the doctors say you could travel? Marcus grinned. 3 weeks, maybe 4. Why? Because when you can move, I'm buying you a drink. She looked around the ward at the 11 other men who owed her their lives. All of you. First round is on me. The cheer that went up could probably be heard across the entire base. 6 weeks later, Keone stood in a courtroom at Naval Station Norfolk and watched Commander Brixton Hale receive his sentence. The court-martial had been swift by military standards. The evidence was overwhelming. Communications logs, drone footage, testimony from intelligence officers, operators, and the CIA director himself. Hale's defense had attempted to argue that his decisions were made in good faith, that he genuinely believed the asset was at risk, that the fog of war had clouded his judgment. The panel had not believed him. Guilty on all counts. Dereliction of duty. Providing false intelligence to combat operators. Conspiracy to conceal intelligence failures. Reckless endangerment resulting in casualties. The judge, a stern captain with 30 years of service, had delivered the sentence without emotion. Commander Brixton Hale, you are hereby sentenced to 25 years confinement at the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth. You are stripped of all rank and privileges. You are dishonorably discharged from the United States Navy. Hale had stood motionless as the words fell. His face was gray, his eyes empty. The man who had threatened Keone with Leavenworth was now headed there himself, and he would not see freedom until he was an old man. If he sought it all, Keone watched the MPs lead him away. She felt no satisfaction, no triumph, only a tired recognition that justice, when it came, rarely felt the way people expected it to feel. Marcus was beside her. Leaning on a cane, he swore he would abandon within the month. He had insisted on attending the sentencing, even though the flight from San Diego had exhausted him. It is over, he said quietly. Keone shook her head. It is never over. Someone else will make the same mistakes. Someone else will put careers ahead of lives. She paused. All we can do is be ready when it happens. Marcus studied her face. You're not going to stop, are you? Even after everything? Stop what? Being the person who takes the shot when no one else will. Keone considered the question. She thought about Black Tide and the 3 names she still carried. She thought about the ridge in Nangarhar and the 17 rounds that had changed everything. She thought about Danny Reinhold learning to walk again, and Marcus standing beside her when he should still be in a hospital bed, and 11 other men who were alive because she had refused to watch them die. No, she said. I'm not going to stop. Marcus nodded. He did not seem surprised. Good. The teams need people like you. People who see clearly when everyone else is blinded by protocol. They walked out of the courthouse together into the weak winter sunlight of a Virginia afternoon. A car was waiting for them, sent by Captain Vasquez to transport them to the next event on the schedule. The Silver Star ceremony was in 3 hours. Keone had tried to decline the medal. She did not feel like she deserved recognition for doing what any decent person should have done. But Admiral Chun had overruled her objections. This is not just about you, he had said. This is about showing every operator in the community that doing the right thing matters. That courage is rewarded. That the Navy values lives over protocol. So she had agreed. Not for herself, for the message it would send. The ceremony was held at the SEAL compound at Little Creek. The audience was small, but significant. The surviving members of Viper Element. Most of them recovered enough to attend. Captain Vasquez and Admiral Chun. Master Chief Rourke, standing at attention in the front row. Juno Weathers, wearing dress whites and a smile she could not suppress. And in the back, seated in a wheelchair but present nonetheless, Danny Reinhold. He had insisted on coming. The doctors had advised against it. His leg was still healing, his strength still rebuilding. But he had looked them in the eye and told them that he would crawl to Virginia if he had to, because he was not going to miss this. Admiral Chun read the citation aloud. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action, Chief Petty Officer Keone Palakiko, while serving as sniper in support of combat operations in Nangarhar Province, Afghanistan, displayed extraordinary heroism in the face of enemy fire. When 12 members of a SEAL element were ambushed and pinned down by numerically superior enemy forces, Chief Palakiko engaged 17 enemy combatants at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters, eliminating all threats and enabling the successful extraction of all friendly personnel. He paused. Chief Palakiko's actions were undertaken in direct defiance of orders from her commanding officer, who was subsequently found to have issued those orders under false pretenses to conceal intelligence failures. Her moral courage in choosing to save American lives over preserving her own career represents the highest traditions of the naval special warfare community. Admiral Chun pinned the silver star to Keone's chest. The medal was small and heavy, a weight she would carry for the rest of her life. Chief Palakiko, he said quietly, so only she could hear, I have been in the Navy for 34 years. I have pinned a lot of medals on a lot of chests, but I have never been prouder than I am right now. Keone saluted. Thank you, sir. The ceremony concluded. The audience rose, and then, one by one, the SEALs of Viper element approached her. Lieutenant Okonkwo shook her hand. Marcus embraced her despite the pain it caused his healing wounds. Danny Reinhold wheeled himself forward and looked up at her with eyes that glistened. 17 shots, he said. 12 lives. One hell of a sniper. She knelt beside his wheelchair, so they were at eye level. You would have done the same for me. Danny shook his head. I do not know if I would have had the courage, but I know that I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of what you did. Keone gripped his shoulder. You already are. All of you are. She looked around at the gathered SEALs. That is why I took the shots. Because you were worth saving. Juno appeared at her side, eyes bright with unshed tears. Chief, there is someone else who wants to see you. Keone rose and turned. A woman was standing at the edge of the crowd, holding the hand of a young girl. The woman looked nervous, uncertain, out of place among the uniforms and medals. But the girl was looking directly at Keone with eyes that held no uncertainty at all. She was perhaps 8 or 9 years old. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple braid. Her dress was new and clean, clearly purchased for this occasion, and Keone recognized her instantly. The child from the village. The girl the fighter had used as a human shield. The small life that had hung in the balance of an impossible ricochet shot. Captain Vasquez appeared beside them. Her name is Samira, she said quietly. We extracted her after the operation. Her family was killed in the ambush. She had nowhere to go. Keone stared. What's she doing here? She asked to come, Vasquez said. When she learned about the ceremony, she asked to meet the woman who saved her. Samira released her guardian's hand and walked forward. She stopped in front of Keone and looked up with solemn eyes. Then she spoke, her English careful and practiced. Thank you for not shooting me. Keone's breath caught. She knelt down, bringing herself to the girl's level, and looked into those dark, serious eyes. I would never have hurt you, she said. Not ever. Samira nodded slowly. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her thin arms around Keone's neck. The embrace was brief. The girl stepped back, took her guardian's hand, and walked away without another word. Keone remained kneeling for a long moment, watching them go. 17 shots, 12 SEALs, 1 child, and finally, she let herself believe that it had all been worth it. 1 year later, Keone stood on a shooting range in Coronado, California, watching the next generation of Navy SEAL snipers learn their craft. The sun was bright and the wind was steady, perfect conditions for the advanced marksmanship course she now led. 24 students, all of them already exceptional shooters, all of them hungry to become something more. 3 of them were women. That number would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. Even 2 years ago, the idea of multiple female candidates in a single SEAL sniper class would have drawn skepticism and resistance. But things had changed. Keone had changed them. Not alone, of course. Admiral Chun had championed new policies. Master Chief Rourke, in a transformation that still surprised everyone who knew him, had become one of the most vocal advocates for expanding opportunities in special operations. The SEALs of Viper Element had told their story to anyone who would listen, spreading the legend of the woman who had saved them with 17 impossible shots. But it had started with her, with a choice made on a ridge in Afghanistan, with the refusal to let 12 men die because protocol said she should. Chief Palakiko, one of the students, called out. Question about windage at extended range. Keone walked over to the firing line. The student was a young woman named Torres, compact and focused, with the same quiet intensity Keone remembered seeing in her own reflection 20 years ago. What's your question, Torres? The student gestured downrange. At 1,500 meters, how do you account for wind shifts that happen between trigger pull and impact? The bullet is in the air for almost 2 seconds. The conditions can change completely in that time. Keone considered the question. It was a good one. The kind of question that separated competent snipers from exceptional ones. You cannot account for it completely, she said. No calculation is perfect at that range. What you can do is read the patterns. Watch the grass, the dust, the way the air moves. Learn to feel the rhythm of the wind, not just measure it. She paused, and then you have to trust yourself. Trust your training. Trust the thousands of hours you have spent learning to read conditions that other people cannot see. She met Torres's eyes. At 1,500 meters, you are not just shooting. You are making a prediction about the future. The only way to get better at that is to take the shot and learn from where it lands. Torres nodded slowly. She turned back to her rifle, adjusted her position, and sent a round downrange. The target, barely visible at that distance, showed a hit 3 inches left of center. Good, Keone said. Now do it again, and again, until that 3 inches becomes 1, and 1 becomes none. She stepped back and watched her students work. The rhythm of the range was familiar and comforting. The crack of rifles, the distant ping of rounds finding targets, the quiet concentration of people pushing themselves toward excellence. This was her purpose now, not taking the shots herself, but teaching others to take them, passing on everything she had learned in 18 years of service, so that the next generation would be ready when their moment came. A vehicle pulled up at the edge of the range. Keone recognized it immediately. She told her assistant instructor to take over and walked toward the parking area. Marcus Trejo stepped out of the driver's seat, moving without the cane he had finally abandoned 6 months ago. His chest bore new scars that would never fully fade, but he was whole, alive, present. Kestrel, he said, grinning. You look like you are enjoying yourself. Someone has to teach these kids how to shoot, Keone replied. Might as well be someone who knows what she is doing. Marcus laughed. He reached back into the vehicle and pulled out a folder. I brought you something. Thought you would want to see it in person. Keone took the folder and opened it. Inside was a photograph of a young woman in a graduation gown, dark hair pulled back, serious eyes bright with accomplishment. Samira. She graduated top of her class, Marcus said. Full scholarship to Georgetown. She wants to study international relations. Maybe diplomacy, maybe intelligence. She has not decided yet. Keone stared at the photograph. The frightened child from the village was gone. In her place was a young woman with a future, with possibilities, with a life that stretched out before her full of potential. She asked me to give you a message, Marcus continued. She said to tell you that she thinks about that day sometimes. Not with fear, with gratitude. She said that you taught her something important. Keone looked up. What I teach her? That sometimes one person can change everything. Marcus paused. That courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else matters more. Keone closed the folder gently. She thought about 17 shots and 12 SEALs and one impossible choice. She thought about the weight of the silver star that she kept in a drawer rather than displaying. She thought about the 3 women on her firing line, each of them working toward a future that her choices had helped make possible. Thank you for bringing this, she said. Marcus nodded. There's one more thing. Danny Reinhold wanted me to tell you that he ran his first mile last week. Full speed, no limp. The doctor said it was impossible. Keone smiled. You should know by now that impossible does not mean much. He does know. That is why he did it. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the students on the range. The crack of rifles continued, steady and purposeful. Do you ever regret it? Marcus asked quietly. The choice you made. Everything that came after. Keone considered the question. She thought about the career she had risked, the freedom she had gambled, the moment on that ridge when she had switched off her radio and chambered around and decided that 12 lives mattered more than her orders. No, she said. Not for a second. Marcus nodded. He did not seem surprised. Good, because I have never regretted being saved by the best sniper in the Navy. Keone shook her head. I'm not the best anymore. That title belongs to whoever earns it next. I'm just the one who got lucky enough to take the shots that mattered. Marcus laughed. Luck had nothing to do with it, Keone. Luck does not make 17 kills at extreme range under fire. Luck does not calculate a ricochet shot to save child. That was skill. That was courage. That was you. He clapped her on the shoulder and walked back to his vehicle. Keone watched him go. Then she turned and walked back to the firing line, where her students were waiting, where the future of special operations was being shaped one shot at a time. Torres looked up as she approached. Chief, I got that 3 inches down to 1. Keone smiled. Then let us make it 0. She settled into her instructor's position, watching the young woman adjust her aim. Remember what I told you. Trust your training. Trust yourself. And when the moment comes, take the shot. Torres exhaled slowly. She squeezed the trigger. The round flew straight and true, crossing 1,500 meters of California air before striking the center of the target with a precision that would have seemed impossible to anyone who did not understand what it took to achieve it. Perfect, Keone said. Now do it again. And on a shooting range in Coronado, beneath a bright sun and a steady wind, the next generation learned what it meant to be ready for the shots that mattered. If this story moved you, drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, your favorite character, or if you have ever witnessed someone make an impossible choice that saved others. We would love to hear from you.